In a world where nothing comes easy, one woman found herself in a battle that no one expected her to win. Hired by a billionaire's family, her days were filled with unimaginable challenges. But there was something they didn't see coming, a strength that would shake them to their core. Every maid before her had been crushed by the weight of the family's cruelty. But this woman? She wasn't like the others. What was her secret? And would she finally be the one to break the cycle of injustice? Or would she, too, fall victim to their ruthless expectations? Stay tuned to find out. Maria had always been a fighter. Growing up in a small town, she'd learned to navigate life with resilience, determined to rise above the obstacles she faced every day. As the daughter of immigrants, she understood what it meant to be underestimated, to be seen as less than. But her hard work paid off when she landed a job as a maid for one of the wealthiest families in the city. It was a far cry from the struggles of her past, a chance at a better life. But as soon as she stepped into their lavish home, she sensed something wasn't right. The staff before her had all left in disgrace, and the stories they whispered when they thought she wasn't listening haunted her. No one had lasted under the billionaire's roof for long. They all said the same thing. His new wife, a woman with a cold smile and a cold heart, had a way of making people disappear. Maria couldn't help but wonder, was she destined to fall the same way? Or was there something she could do that no one else had? Maria's days in the mansion started to feel like a blur, endless cleaning, cooking, and mindless tasks. But it was the looks, the whispered comments, and the subtle but cruel treatment that gnawed at her. It wasn't just the work. It was the constant reminder that she didn't belong. Every day, she felt the weight of the family's disdain. They treated her like a shadow, an invisible, expendable servant. The worst came from the new wife, Sophia. Her smile was always poised, her demeanor impeccable, but Maria could see through it. Sophia watched her with a cold, calculating gaze, never missing an opportunity to make her feel small. At first, it was little things, a comment about Maria's accent, a sneer when she made a mistake, as if the world expected her to be perfect. But then, it escalated. One morning, after Maria had spent hours scrubbing the floors, Sophia called her into the parlor. The room was quiet, the air thick with tension. Sophia looked her up and down, then spoke, her voice laced with mock sweetness. "You're lucky we even hired someone like you," she said, her eyes narrowing. "It's not every day we let someone like you into our home." Maria froze, her heart pounding. She had heard the undertones, but this was different. This wasn't just discrimination. It was an attack on her very being. Sophia's words were like a slap in the face, but Maria refused to let them show. She knew the consequences of reacting. But inside, rage swelled. How dare she treat her this way? It didn't stop there. Sophia began to treat her worse than the other staff. One afternoon, as Maria was organizing the laundry, Sophia came into the room, her steps slow and deliberate. She picked up a piece of clothing, inspecting it with feigned disgust. "This isn't how I like it," she said, throwing it onto the floor. "You really are useless, aren't you?" Maria felt a fire ignite inside her. She wanted to yell, to push, back, but something stopped her. An instinct to survive, to not give Sophia the satisfaction of seeing her break. But with every insult, every dismissal, the anger festered. The frustration turned to something darker, something she wasn't sure she could control. Days passed in a haze of mistreatment, and Maria's exhaustion began to show. She was physically drained, but worse. Her spirit was breaking. The other maids would leave whispers of encouragement, but none of them had the courage to speak out. They were all too afraid of the consequences. They knew Sophia's power. Maria had become a prisoner in her own mind, trapped by the suffocating grip of discrimination. But then one evening, something happened that changed everything. Maria had been cleaning the grand dining room when Sophia walked in, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floors. She wasn't alone. A guest, a wealthy business associate, stood beside her laughing. Sophia turned to Maria, a cruel smile playing on her lips. "Meet the new maid," she said to her guest, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "She can hardly keep up, but she's good at pretending." Maria's face flushed, her heart thundering. This was no longer just about her job. It was about her dignity. She had been pushed to the edge, but now something inside her snapped. She could feel the anger bubbling to the surface, threatening to spill over. But then, Sophia's guest turned to her with a smirk, and it all clicked. Maria wasn't just a maid anymore. She was a pawn in their game, a game she hadn't even known she was playing. She could feel the eyes of the room on her, judgment in every glance. The question now was, how far would she let them push her before she fought back? Was she finally going to break free? Or would she let them break her instead? Maria stood in the middle of the grand ballroom, the soft hum of chatter around her blending into the deafening roar in her head. The gala was in full swing, an air of wealth and privilege hanging over every inch of the room. Yet, for Maria, it felt like a cage. She was invisible, nothing more than a piece of furniture in the opulent mansion. The guests laughed and sipped, their champagne oblivious to the quiet torment unfolding behind the scenes. Sophia entered, the picture of grace, her eyes sweeping over the crowd. She moved like a queen, but there was something different about tonight, something darker. As she locked eyes with Maria, the cruel smile she wore was colder than ever. The night before, Sophia had whispered to Maria that no one would believe her if she ever spoke up, that she would always be the help, that no one would care about her or her struggles. But tonight, Maria felt something shift inside her. The years of mistreatment, the insults, the dehumanization, it all crashed down in a wave of pure, unrelenting fury. For the first time, she wasn't afraid of Sophia's gaze. She didn't cower. She didn't shrink. Sophia, with her icy smile, walked over to Maria and made a show of looking her up and down. "Still here, I see," she said, the words like venom. "I didn't expect you to last this long. You really should know your place." The words burned, but Maria didn't flinch. Without warning, she took a step forward, her voice steady, but filled with an intensity that shocked even her. "My place is where I choose it to be," she said, the words ringing out in the silence. The room fell still. Every head turned. Sophia's expression faltered for a split second. Confusion flickered across her face. Maria's heart raced, but there was something in her now, something she hadn't realized was there until this very moment. Her voice didn't tremble. Her hands didn't shake. Sophia's lips parted, ready to strike back with another insult, but before she could, the unthinkable happened. A few of the guests, those who had always ignored her, looked at her differently. A couple of them even nodded in agreement. The tension in the room shifted. Maria had spoken up, not just for herself, but for every person who had been silenced, overlooked, or dismissed. The room was on the edge of chaos. Would Sophia retaliate? Would Maria finally find the courage to push back against years of mistreatment? And what would the rest of the world think if they knew the truth? In the silence that followed Maria's bold words, something incredible happened. Sophia stood frozen, her mask of control slipping away. The room, once filled with whispers and judgment, had become a battleground for dignity. Sophia's expression twisted into a scowl, but it wasn't the venomous reaction Maria had expected. For the first time, she saw fear. Fear of being exposed, of her cruelty being acknowledged. Maria had stripped away the facade. But this moment wasn't just about Sophia's defeat. It was about something bigger. As the guests began to murmur among themselves, the power dynamic shifted. Some people stood up for Maria, those who had once looked the other way now acknowledging the injustice. Maria had sparked something in them, a recognition of the harm that had been allowed to continue unchecked. As the night wore on, Sophia retreated, her composure shattered. Maria's heart was still pounding, but she felt lighter, like a weight had been lifted. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel invisible. She was seen. But the real impact came long after the gala ended. Word of what happened spread. Maria's defiance became a symbol, not just of standing up to one person, but of standing up to an entire system that silences and diminishes people based on their race. The moment became a call to action for those who had been complicit in their silence. Maria didn't just fight for herself that night, she fought for every person who had been overlooked, mistreated, and made to feel less than. In that single act of courage, Maria had not only reclaimed her power, but she had ignited a fire in others. As she walked away from that mansion, she knew the battle wasn't over. But she also knew this: change had begun. Will you be a part of that change? Will you stand up when it matters most, even when the odds are stacked against you? The choice is yours.